Hi, boys and girls. Today we will be reading our fourth listening and learning story. Our story today is all about tradespeople who make clothes. Today's story will teach you how cloth was made long ago in colonial times. Most of the cloth used for our clothing today is made in factories with the help of big machines. 300 years ago in a colonial town, people made cloth by hand. In today's story, by the end, you will be able to describe spinners and weavers in a colonial town. Let's go over our vocabulary word for the day. The word is garments. Word garments are pieces or articles of clothing. For example, I was cold because I was wearing light garments, shorts, and a t-shirt. In today's story called The Cloth Makers, you will learn about two tradespeople, the spinner and the weaver. They both helped with different steps in the process of making cloth. Let's get started. Several hundred years ago, farmers made their own cloth from materials they gathered from their farms. Most farmers sheared wool from sheep they raised on their farms. On a few farms where cotton was grown, farmers picked cotton from cotton plants that grew in their fields. The farmers' wives cleaned, combed, dyed, and spun this cotton or wool into thread before weaving it into cloth. But this took a lot of time, so if they had several garments or pieces of clothing, they could give their cotton or wool to tradespeople who made the cloth for them. Today we will learn about spinners and weavers, two types of tradespeople in town who had tools that helped them to make more cloth at one time than a farmer and his family could make by themselves. Many farmers used the wool of sheep to make cloth. Once a sheep's coat was thick, farmers would shave or shear off the wool with a sharp blade. The wool grew back and the sheep were ready to be sheared again the following spring. Let's take a close look at cotton, a plant grown on farms in the southern colonies along the coast. The cotton first had to be planted and then hand-picked from the plant. A cotton ball is the seed pod of the cotton plant. Farmers pluck the white, string-like cotton fibers found inside the cotton ball. The stalk of another plant called flax could also be picked apart into fibers that could be made into a cloth called linen. Whether cotton or flax, farmers needed to clean the fibers to remove the seeds and dirt from these plant parts before using them to make cloth. The first step in making cloth is to make the cotton, flax, or wool into thread. In this picture are some tools the farmer had at home that would help him do this. After the cotton, flax, or wool was cleaned, it had to be combed with a tool called a carder. As you can see from this picture, hand carders look similar to cat or dog brushes. Women would use these two carders at a time to brush the wool until all the fibers lined up in the same direction. Once the fiber was combed, the woman might dye the cotton or wool different colors using the juice from different plants or berries. Dyes back then were homemade too. They dipped the cotton or wool in the dye, allowing it to soak up the colorful juices. Dyeing was hard work and took a long time, so farmers usually skipped this step if they were making cloth at home. That's one reason why the clothing sewn at home from cloth made on the farm in those days were so plain, usually just a whitish beige color. It was a rare treat to buy colorful cloth in town. Next, women making their own clothes at home used small wooden spindles, like this one, to twist the clean fibers into thread. Women turned the spindle by hand to make yarn that was much stronger than a single fiber of cotton, flax, or wool. If a farmer could afford it, he would buy a spinning wheel like this one for his wife. The spinning wheel allowed a woman to turn cotton, flax, or wool fibers into yarn or thread by twisting them together very tightly. A spinning wheel could spin wool into thread much more quickly than a hand spindle. In rare cases, when a farmer was very wealthy or lived near a large town, he would buy cloth from a spinner, a tradesperson who turned cotton, flax, or wool into thread using a spinning wheel. The spinning wheel not only has a spindle attached to it, but it also has a big wheel and a foot pedal called a treadle. The spinner would step on the treadle to make the big wheel spin. This was called treadling. See how the thread between the woman's left hand and the spindle has been spun into thread and is ready to be collected on the spindle? A large spinning wheel turned the spindle around quickly, allowing the spinner to make a lot of thread or yarn in one day. One way that farmers and their families could save time was to buy yarn or thread from the spinner and then weave this thread into the cloth by hand at home. Or if they wanted to save even more time and effort, they could visit another tradesperson, the weaver, to make the cloth for them. After the spinner made the yarn or thread, the weaver took over. The weaver's job was to weave yarn or thread into cloth. If you look at the clothing you are wearing right now, you'll see that the cloth is actually made up of lots of little rows of threads, just like in this picture. Some of these rows go up and down and others go across. To do this, the weaver used a tool called a loom. A typical loom has pedals that the weaver used to control the machine's parts. The weaver used a special piece called a shuttle to carry the strings back and forth from one side of the loom to the other. The newly made cloth was rolled up on the bolt underneath the loom. Today, cloth is made in factories by machines, but these machines spin and weave just like the tradespeople did long ago. So now you know how cotton, flax, and wool were woven into cloth by hand years ago, both at home and by the spinners and weavers in town. The end. Now let's have a discussion. What is the main topic or main idea of today's story? What plants could be used to make cloth? What animal also provided material for cloth? What could you buy from a tradesperson who is a spinner? Could you buy cloth from a spinner? Why not? What did a weaver do? In your journal, write and draw about if you would rather be a spinner or a weaver and why. Have these discussions with your families.